Welcome, new viewers and old viewers, to another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. This is the show where you learn all about conflict and its resolution strategies, the what, the when, the how, the where, the who. I provide evidence-based frameworks that are salient to the conversation at hand. I also like to provide either original mnemonics, for example, my 5 A's of conflict resolution, or mnemonics of other authors that are expert in conflict resolution. I share stories and analogies to illustrate points. I like to reserve the last Friday of each month to have a guest. Now, this guest might be a conflict resolution expert or someone who I deem will have some value to share. I also reserve the third Friday of each month for story time. And what do I mean by that? By story time, I mean I analyze and we analyze and discuss a case study scenario. It could also be a drama or a movie or an incident. We analyze it, discuss what went well and what could have been done differently, and provide suggestions to rectify a complex situation. The theme for this month of March is all about forgiveness and conflict in the workplace. My mission is to empower people to deal with conflict effectively, efficiently, and in a timely manner. Today's episode is titled Forgiveness and Conflict, and we're going to discuss the myths and sayings. And later on, we're going to talk a little bit about different behaviors or incidents in the workplace that might require either the perpetrator or the recipient of an unjust act or behavior as it pertains to forgiveness. So with not much ado, let's talk a little bit about forgiveness. I like to discuss conflict from a holistic perspective. Why? Because I believe that we human beings are holistic beings. And by that, I mean we comprise the physical, the emotional, the cultural, social, and spiritual domains. So in the same token, when you're addressing conflict and or forgiveness, all those domains, or at least one or two, usually more than one of those domains come into play. So with that in mind, let us talk a little bit more now about the different sayings that we usually hear, popular sayings as it pertains to forgiveness, okay? So the first one is, I do, and then ask for forgiveness. When I hear this or see it, for example, where I've seen it as well, with some sort of interview questions, what they're getting at is, are you the kind of person that's a risk taker? Do you calculate your risk without thinking about the outcomes, be it positive or negative? So I do, and then ask for forgiveness implies that someone might do something knowing very well that it might be frowned upon. The outcome may not be necessarily what others might like, but they're going to go ahead and do it and then ask for forgiveness later. Now, is that how you practice? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there is a school of thought, a body of people or group of individuals who practice this way. And then there's another saying, to err is human and to forgive is divine. I believe that most of you have heard this saying either at home, in your workplaces, maybe in your previous life as students, whatever the setting might be, this statement is repeated over and over again. Did you know who came up with that statement? Well, it's actually an English poet by the name of Alexander Pope. He was the one who coined the saying, to err is human and to forgive is divine. And like it states, it's pretty self-explanatory, at least I hope it is, basically suggesting that we are all human beings, we're fallible, no one is perfect. And the only person who's perfect is God Almighty. And he's the one who can really, truly forgive. At least that's my understanding of what this is saying. And then we have another one. Forgiveness frees you, the prisoner. What does that imply? It is implying and suggesting that if you harbor unforgiveness, two scenarios might occur. The first one is the person who's injured you or the person you deem that injured you, be it knowingly or unknowingly, may not even know that you're harboring unforgiveness. Hopefully it hasn't grown to bitterness and taken roots of some kind, okay? So this statement, forgiveness frees you, the prisoner, I might be paraphrasing that, suggests that when you harbor unforgiveness, it's almost like drinking a bottle or a cup of poison. Now, with that analogy, who is affected? The injured party or the person that injured the individual? Well, it would be the injured party because they're the ones drinking the poison, AKA unforgiveness. And then there's another saying or proverb or idiom I want to talk about. It's once bitten, twice shy. You might ask, how is that really related to forgiveness? It's indirectly related to forgiveness. And basically, once bitten, twice shy suggests that once you've had a negative experience, be it interpersonal relationships, maybe an event or something that was said to you, you become guarded. So that one's even just one experience alone is enough. Again, depending on the magnitude of what it is, it's sufficient enough to make someone create walls. Now, mind you, are you creating walls or boundaries? Stay tuned. We will have another episode later on in this month. Actually, the last Friday, which I mentioned, is guest day. I'm going to have a guest come talk about conflict, forgiveness, and boundaries. Okay? So reflect on some of those things we've talked about so far. So you might be asking or wondering or thinking to yourself, so what is forgiveness exactly? So most people may gravitate towards pulling out a dictionary, and depending on your preference, it could be the Oxford Dictionary, English Dictionary, or it could be Cambridge or some other version. I tend to lean towards the Oxford English Dictionary myself. So I could give you a definition of forgiveness from the Oxford English Dictionary or any other dictionary. But have you stopped to ask yourself, who pens the different definitions and phrases in the dictionary? Well, a human being did that. Yes, they might be deemed experts, but think about this. Haven't some definitions and expressions and phrases evolved over time? And why I ask that question is, let's take, for example, in the workplace, where you work in a team environment with different people from the different generation gap theories. And by that, I mean like maybe traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, Y, and now Z. Ys are also called the millennials. And lo and behold, believe it or not, there is a Generation Z right now, okay? That will be another topic for another episode. But why do I bring that up? Let's take Generation Z and maybe the Ys. If they were to say, come back from a party and they're sharing experiences with you, and they'll be like, oh, that party was wicked, or that party was dope. Wicked, traditionally, wicked means evil, right? But the slang, yes, you can call it a slang, but different generation gaps may not know that's what they mean by wicked. So that means cool, the party was cool, it was pumping, or whatever expressions might be used, or slangs, right? In the same token, if they use the expression, it was dope. My understanding of what dope normally means is some sort of illegal drugs, but that's not what they're trying to convey, okay? So I shared that just to illustrate a point that these dictionaries, keep in mind, originally were penned in a different century that we are currently living in, some of the words have evolved. Some of the meaning of the words and phrases have evolved over time, but some have remained. So I say all that to share that I choose not to give you a classic dictionary definition of forgiveness. Rather, I invite you to reflect on what forgiveness means to you. And along those lines, I will share my own description of forgiveness and other people's as well, okay? So I had to reflect, really, and I didn't realize this would take me a little bit of time. When I say a little bit of time, a few minutes, not hours, but a few minutes, to pen what forgiveness meant to me, or how I would describe it. Not how I would define it, but how I would describe it. And this is what I'm going to read to you right now. Forgiveness is seeing someone through the eyes of pity and patience, that the person is fallible, and deciding not to credit their actual or perceived wrongs to them, recognizing that it is a process and I need to be patient with myself. It is being cautious, wise, and reflecting on what caused the wrong in the first place, if known. So I repeat, what does forgiveness mean to you, especially in a conflict situation? Now, Corrie ten Boom is somebody you probably have heard about and read about. She was one of the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. She says that forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. I was like, wow, that's pretty deep. Did you know she's isolating the will from the temperature of the heart? And she says it's an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. At first glance, I'm like, wow, I really like that. But then when I stop and reflect that we're holistic beings again, it's very difficult to separate sometimes the will from our emotions and matters of the heart. Now, Max Lucado, an author, you feel free to research him, penned something that stayed with me for the longest time. And I actually had it as one of my workplace email signature. He says, relationships don't thrive because the guilty are punished, but because the innocent are merciful. Because the innocent are merciful. For the longest time, I have erroneously, falsely worded it as relationships don't thrive because the guilty are punished, but because the innocent are forgiven. Forgiven as in the present continuous tense, ing. So coming back to his statement, I think that's really deep. Again, when there's a conflict situation, what is your desired outcome? Do you want it to be constructive to build up the relationship, to build up your organization, to build up your team dynamics, or do you want it to be destructive? So he says, I repeat, relationships don't thrive because the guilty are punished, but because the innocent are merciful. Hold that thought, because yes, there's a time and place for justice. Okay, just in case you were thinking ahead. Now, I would like to share a brief story about a South African lady that was in the era of apartheid in South Africa. So for some of you who may not know what apartheid was, it's basically some sort of genocide that was happening and segregation and different things happening. Anyway, disclaimer alert, this might be a little bit poignant for some if you have a South African background, and just please take note of that. But the story goes, and as far as I know, it's a true story. This lady, her husband and son were murdered during the apartheid era, unjustly murdered. Well, no one should ever be murdered justly or unjustly. But what was so brutal was she witnessed both of them being murdered, the son. Now, I'm very visual. What I understood from what I read was it was almost as if he was, for lack of a better word, barbecued alive. Akin to when you think of rotisserie chicken, when it's being cooked, it's going round and round those metal spikes. That was kind of the impression I got from my imagery when I read that story. Fast forward, the perpetrator who was responsible for killing her husband and son was brought to court for justice. She was in the courtroom along with other people, I guess, of the community and other people in the courtroom as well. And she was asked, what do you think he deserves for justice? There was silence in the room, people waiting to hear what she would say. And what she said was, I paraphrase, I have so much love to give. My husband and son are dead. I want him to come visit me on a weekly or monthly basis. She stated some frequency of the visitations. As soon as she said that, someone bursted out singing Amazing Grace. The perpetrator fell down. He passed out. He couldn't believe his ears. But that's what she said. So what does Corrie ten Boom and this South African mother have in common? I can think of two things right away. First, they were both recipients of victims of unjust atrocities. Second, they found in their heart to forgive their perpetrators. And that I highly respect them for. Now, what is forgiveness not? What isn't forgiveness? As you can see, being merciful, seeking justice does not mean you're being unforgiven. So let's get that clear. That's not what it means. Forgiveness, it's not being a doormat. It does mean being wise as a serpent, but being innocent as doves. Have you heard the saying, to forgive is to forget? Do you agree with that? I liken this to two things. First, an elephant, and second, a wound. The elephant, you might have heard that the expression, an elephant never forgets, basically implying that an elephant has a long-term memory. It remembers things from, it's amazing, its memory capabilities. In the same token, some people remember things. For example, I have a photographic memory. I can see you, hear you, and I will remember certain details about you. Things maybe most people may not remember, I remember. Now that's a blessing, and that could be falling on the negative side of things in that I might remember hurts for a long, long, long time. Is that right? No, but that's the reality, okay? Now I mentioned a wound. When you've acquired an injury, let's say you had a laceration or a cut on your hand, a deep cut. Now, depending on your ethnic background and your nutrition status and your ability to heal, that laceration or cut might heal without leaving a scar. It might leave a scar that's pronounced, or it may leave a scar that's very light, is hardly discernible. However, the pain from that injury doesn't normally linger. It's not usually acute. So why am I sharing this analogy? With forgiveness, when you've been injured somehow, depending on the magnitude of the injury, psychologically or physical, however it is that forgiveness is required, with time, and again, hopefully one has effective coping skills, the pain of that injury should not be acute. But a thought sometimes, or an incident, might trigger what happened the same token as what a scar will serve for an injury that happened. But that pain should not be acute, okay? So with that in mind, we've talked about the different myths, sayings. I've given you a description of mine as it pertains to forgiveness, shared other people's thoughts about forgiveness. Now let's fast forward and talk about scenarios in the workplace that might require forgiveness. By that, either the injured party needs to forgive individuals or organizations that have injured them somehow. So that's the lens we're going to go through this list. I'm going to list about 10 different points. I might elaborate on one or two, well, a few of them, not all of them, okay? So the first one is bullying, harassment, and discrimination. This definitely requires forgiveness. Now, the pace at which someone can come to a point to forgive, I believe, is personal. I'd like to invite you to just take a moment and reflect on what a person who's been a recipient of bullying, harassment, or discrimination might be going through. Emotionally, they might be having low self-esteem, might be reflecting what is wrong with me that this other party, be it individual organization, thought it was okay to bully me, harass me, or discriminate against me. There must be something wrong with me. So they're having false perceptions as a result of what happened. If you or someone you know has been a recipient of bullying and you're having such thoughts, may I suggest and request you to think of it in a different light. What was so special or is special about you that people feel so threatened to hurt you? I know it sounds like a little twisted way of thinking, but the truth, as you've all heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. No one who is mentally sound, spiritually sound, would willingly bully, harass, or discriminate against somebody. Another example is employees taking credit for work that was done. Have you been in such a situation? Do you know someone's been in such a situation? I have experienced that. Pretty much everything on this list, one shape or form, I have experienced it. So when I speak from a point of empathy and also from a point of guiding you in how to deal with it, okay? My consolation in terms of employees taking credit for work, I'll be honest with you, it really bothered me. Once in a while, a thought comes, I'm like, wow, I was the one who did this, but no one is giving me the right credit. But then I'm reminded that promotion comes neither from the east or the west or the south, but from the north, meaning God. He sees everything, he knows everything. All things will come to light eventually, always. And the truth will be known. Sometimes not when we want it to, but the truth will be revealed. So that's where I take solace and consolation in. We have gossip, slander, assassination of character. These definitely require forgiveness. And then what about not being promoted when you're capable? And then we have betrayals, unjust layoffs or dismissals. What about workplace physical injury? So some of the behaviors I mentioned above, like for example, gossip, slander, and assassination of character, are actually bullying behaviors. And their psychological injury is what they are. But what about physical injury? Maybe you receive you are injured on the job. Depending on what work setting you work in, there might be different things that might make you injured. You do need to forgive at some point in time. Why? Some studies have shown that when we harbor unforgiveness, it might cause physical symptoms in our bodies. You might remember I mentioned we're holistic beings. And then we have burnout. Did you know that the World Health Organization in 2019 defined burnout or describe burnout as an occupational phenomenon, not a medical condition. And what made me pause and smile to some extent was when it was written occupational phenomenon, not a medical condition, not was bolded. So if you're experiencing burnout in your workplace, maybe it's not you. It has nothing to do with your capabilities. It might have everything to do with your work environment. So that's food for thought. Okay. So what are some call to actions for you? Because the list I have listed are traumatic issues. I believe you will agree with me. The different things I listed are traumatic. So what is your call to action? I'd like you to reflect on a few things, okay? Which of those behaviors or scenarios do you identify with and need to forgive? Are you participating in any one of the behaviors mentioned? Do you know anyone that is going through any one of those behaviors or incidents? How can you be a support? So some resources I would like to recommend to you is, well, in a workplace, usually HR is the go-to. Believe it or not, some workplaces do not have HR. So whatever the HR substitute would be, department, hopefully your workplace is psychologically safe and you have an HR department that is willing to listen to you and act speedily. Did you know that if you observe bullying behavior or harassment and discrimination and you do not act in terms of reporting it, you can be deemed an accomplice? Food for thought. And then another resource could be, hopefully your organization has a whistleblowing policy. And then there's always a spiritual support, either within your organization or outside of your organization. And I hope your community has a distress calling center. And of course, most organizations tend to, again, depending on the size of it, tend to have an employee family assistance program whereby you can access confidential mental health support if needed, okay? So I hope from today's conversation, you have gleaned perhaps different ways of looking at forgiveness, different traumatic issues that either you or someone you know is experiencing or have experienced. And I hope you can find it in your place one way or the other to forgive so you can move on and not let anyone stop you from being the best that you can be. So how can you reach me and who am I? In case you're just wondering, okay, this was good, but how can we reach you? Well, you can reach me at my website, which is www.shalomeagleswings.care. My email is cheryl@shalomeagleswings.care. My business name is Shalom Eagles Wings. And I'll give you a little bit of a description of what my services entail shortly. But I want to let you know and invite you, I'll let you know first that this website on which we're on this platform is Win-Win Women. Mission is basically to care, collaborate, and connect with billions of women around the world. So please go to their website and visit us, if you will, to learn more about the different services, all about this global movement, okay? So for me, if you need any help as it pertains to strategic management, anything to do with organization development, change management, risk management, policy reviews, conflict resolution coaching, feel free to email me at the email or visit my website. So you can always find me here for another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. And DHA stands for Doctor of Health Administrator. administration, but I would like to leave you with this thought. Remember, you are needed in this world to be a solution. Be the best that you can, and do not rob the world of a precious gem, you. Goodbye, and have a splendid day.